What's up, guys? CuzBadGuys here, back with another tournament report. This tournament report is going to be with Demons of Chaos. Remember to like and subscribe, it helps out the channel. This tournament is going to be an RTT at Paragon City Games, which is one of the local game stores I have in my community. I have to start off by thanking the store and the host to the event, the TO. Without them, we wouldn't be able to have this tournament, and I really appreciate the ability to have this. Let's go over the army I'm planning to take for this tournament. So we're taking the Nurgle Boys. I'm excited to be able to play this army. Heading it up, I've got a Demon Prince, which is a Ogre Tyrant that I've converted into being Tamurkhan. So this guy has got light armor, so a 6-up armor save. He is a Demon of Nurgle, which is going to mean when he gets hit in close combat, successful 6s have to be re-rolled. He is a level 4 wizard, is my general, has the Spoil Pox, which is any Demon of Nurgle that's inside of his command range, which is 12 inches, gets to re-roll 1s to hit, which I think is going to be pretty huge, as re-rolls are very hard to come by in this game. So I think re-rolling 1s to hit is going to be pretty big, because also the Demons of Nurgle, so like the Plague Bearers, the Herald, and the Great Unclean One, they all have poison attacks. So being able to get re-rolls to get more auto wounds, I think will be pretty big. I also gave him the Ether Blade. So the Ether Blade is no armor saves allowed against his attacks. So instead of having AP1 from his ensorcered weapon, he just straight up ignores armor saves. I found this to be pretty good, because usually knights, that kind of stuff, come after him and his unit. And with him having the Ether Blade, he just chops right through their armor. He is also, for his wizard levels, he is Demonology. I really like Demonology as I put him in a unit. He comes with chances to be able to get 2 different enchantments, which are really good upgrades to units. He can also give himself fly in the movement phase to make it so he and his unit are really, really fast. And Demonology, I feel like, is just really good as a choice for him. The next character is going to be the Great Unclean One. This guy, I've given him the Plague Flail, which is probably one of the best weapons in the game. It's +2 strength in the first round of combat, as it's a flail, but it's always AP3, which is monstrous. He is a level 4 wizard, and I've gone Battle Magic with him. I've gone Battle Magic with him because I want access to things like Hammerhand, Fireball, Pillar of Fire, Arcane Urgency, and Oaken Shield. I want Oaken Shield because I want to be able to turn his Demon Ward save into a true ward save, so a true 5-up. I want Arcane Urgency to be able to move him specifically again. Usually I'll target him with being able to move again. And then Pillar of Fire and Fireball are just good spells to be able to shoot out and target people with. And then Hammerhand is going to be something that's good because I want him to be stuck in, as a Great Unclean One is a flightless dragon. He's toughness 7, 7 wounds, super hard to wound, and because of that Plague Flail, can really slap back and smash people with a D3 damage. Lastly, for characters, we've got a Demonic Herald of Nurgle. This guy's got a Plague Sword, which is going to be a weapon that is Armorbane 1 and does not allow regen against itself. It's not a super great weapon, but it's just his stock standard stuff. The big reason why this guy's in the list is for the Demonic Locust, the demon version of a battle standard bearer. So on top of it being static combat resolution of +1, it also gives a 12-inch bubble of my guys crumble less by 1 in the demonic version. So it's not entirely like the undead way where guys crumble. You still roll a leadership check, but the banner makes it so you lose one less guy if you fail a leadership. This is essentially here to make it so I have better staying power and more static combat resolution. He's also no slouch in being able to do a challenge. He'll super beat up on unit champions, and he can pretty much go toe-to-toe with regular heroes. He's not going to be able to go toe-to-toe with some like Lord on a Dragon or something like that, but he's going to be able to beat up on regular hero challenge stuff. Moving on to core, we've got ourselves a big old block of 29 Plague Bearers of Nurgle. These guys also come with Plague Swords. So Armor Bane 1, no regen saves allowed. They have full command, and then their standard is upgraded to be the Standard of Seeping Decay, which is going to be this unit and any characters in the unit get to reroll 1s to wound. So if this unit, Tamurkhan is going to be connected to this unit. So this unit is going to be able to reroll 1s to hit and 1s to wound, which getting rerolls like that in the old world is kind of unheard of. And Plague Bearers aren't incredibly killy. They are strength and toughness 4. They're only 1 attack apiece. Initiative 2. They're not super killy. They're more tough than they are killy. But with the buffs that I'm going to be putting on these guys, along with these rerolls, I think this unit is really going to smash. Moving on, we've got our next unit of Plague Bearers. This is going to be a unit of 14 with just a champion. I almost always run a unit kind of similar to this in any of my armies. It's there to really take up a flank and be a position holder, to be able to threaten flanks and also be able to take a charge from some random stuff. The unit champion is in there to make it so he can take a challenge from something like a dragon and make it so the unit doesn't instantly die. And he's also there to make it so he can issue a challenge or accept a challenge to make it so something like my Great Unclean One doesn't get challenged out and is able to smash into a unit. Next in core, I've got 2 units of Chaos Furies. These are bare bone units, so they are just units of 5, and I've also not given them an upgrade to have a Mark of a God, so they are just undivided stock standard. This is the first time that I'm running them as stock standard. Normally I run them as Mark of Corn for the +1 strength on the charge, but I've found that the things that I send them after, they don't need the +1 strength. They're already strength 4. They have Fury's charge, so they get 2 attacks on the charge. I utilize them against war machines and skirmish units, and they really excel at it. They haven't really let me down in going after screens and hitting cannons and stuff. Lastly, in the army, I've got a unit of 3 Flamers. This has a Pyroclaster champion that has been upgraded to be an Exalted Flamer that has been maxed out to be a level 3 wizard. He also has an upgrade of the Power Vortex, which Power Vortex is going to be if an enemy wizard is inside of my dispel range, which is the reason for the upgrade to the level 3. It makes it so I have a dispel range of 24 inches. That enemy caster is at -1 to cast. So this is a way that I can get a cheeky up on my opponents in the magic phase and being able to dispel their magic. The Flamer also goes with Demonology, as I found that something like the Summoning is really, really good on Flamers. The Summoning is a range of 18 inches and it's a magic missile, and that's the same range as their Warp Flame attacks, so they pair really well together. Pre-tournament, let's talk about 2 different things. So first I want to go over battle strategy. So this is going to be my standard deployment for going up against an opponent. Why am I setting it up this way? So on the right and left flank, I've got both of my units of Furies. The Furies have Vanguard, so they're able to move forward 8 inches or just do an 8-inch move before turn 1. This is really going to help them in being able to get into position to do either a turn 1 charge against a screen unit, which has used Scout and is in the center of the board, or they're going to be able to march fly towards war machines and shut down shots from cannons and that kind of stuff. So being able to block line of sight to stuff to make it so things like rock lobbers and the like have to shoot, not being able to draw line of sight. It can also do the same thing to cannons and stuff. And then get a turn 2 charge against those types of war machines. Next, I've got next moving in on both sides is my units of Plague Bearers. So the Plague Bearers are really my battle line and are going to be the main force that's going to be taking charges and doing charges. I've placed the Great Unclean One in between the two, as he is a flightless dragon, so you want to center him on the board as much as possible, because he's not going to have a ton of movement to be able to just get to somewhere without extenuating circumstances. So something like magic, helping him out with the arcane urgency and stuff. The bigger unit has both the BSB and Tamurkhan in it, and that's my workhorse of the army. That's the unit that's going to be chewing through my opponent's army and trying to get the most amount of points for me. It's designed to be able to take a charge and then in the next turn really dish out pain with just doing a ton of damage back. The unit of Flamers are also centralized, as the leader of the Flamers has the power vortex, so he wants to get within dispel range of my opponent's casters to really start oppressing magic. He and his unit will also start moving in, being able to line up shots in between the Great Unclean One and the Plague Bearer unit. So lines up shots and gets shots for both the Flamer attacks and for the summoning. And then that being said, let's move on to the next tactic that I have that is pre-game for this army. So as you can tell, I effectively have 3 level 4 casters, as I've got a level 4 in Tamurkhan, which is the Prince, a level 4 in the Great Unclean One, and then a level 3 with the Flamers. But because the Flamer has the Mark of Tzeentch, he gets +1 to cast, so he has a +4 to do his spells. The trick with the 3 casters is this army has no shooting at all, so I need to bring as much firepower as possible through magic. That being said, the way that you want to roll off for spells for these 3 guys is you want to roll the Great Unclean One first, because you want to have a chance to see if you get Fireball and Pillar of Fire. Next, you do Tamurkhan, and you would drop something like the Chaos Vortex from Demonology for the summoning. And you'll always drop something like that for the summoning, because you want Tamurkhan to be able to have magic missile in his back pocket. You always want to be able to shoot a magic missile and either chip off a last couple wounds from a unit to make it so it's dead, because it's all about getting victory points, or you want to be able to blast a screening unit to make it so you can line up a charge against something that you actually want to get into combat with. The last caster that I'll roll for will be the Exalted Flamer, as he has a choice of being able to drop a spell for Gift of Mutation, which is a Tzeentch signature spell, which is a hex that can minus weapon skill, toughness, or strength, which minusing toughness is huge. Being able to lower toughness of something like a dragon or a big unit pre being charged by either my Great Unclean One or the Plague Bearers will be game changing. So, but I always want to be able to have at least 2 magic missiles. So that's the reason why I will always roll the Great Unclean One first, looking for Fireball and Pillar of Fire. If I get one of those, then I do Tamurkhan, and I'll always drop something for the summoning. And then if I've got those 2, then it means I know that my Flamer of Tzeentch can drop his signature for Gift of Mutation. Into round 1 of the tournament. This is going to be versus Night Goblins. It's going to be open battle, 6 turns, and victory points. This is going to be my opponent's list. Something that I noted was that he didn't max out Fanatics, so he's only got 7 Fanatics instead of the 9 for his 3 units. He does have a Giant, 2 Mangler Squigs, and Hoppers, so I need to watch out for those. Let's talk deployment. So for deployment, I did my standard deployment style. So on each flank, I've got the Furies. Then in the middle, I've got my battle line of the Plague Bearers next to each other. In between the 2, I've got the Great Unclean One. And then the big unit has been joined by both the BSB and Tamurkhan. Because my opponent is Night Goblins and there isn't a huge Death Star unit or big model that really needs to be debuffed with something like Gift of Mutation, the Flamers have taken the Summoning as their standard spell, and they have been placed on the left flank. Because my opponent on his left flank, he's got his unit of Squigs, a Giant, a unit of Squig Hoppers, then he's got his big battle line of Night Goblins, which is 3 units of 30 Night Goblins, and then a unit of Squig Hoppers, and then his 2 Mangler Squigs are on his right flank, which would be on my left side. On the roll-off, I got turn 1. I pushed forward quite a bit more aggressively on my left flank than my right flank. My right flank, I moved the Furies up to be out of the 18-inch max charge distance of the Mangler Squigs and the Hoppers, so I'm at 19 inches because I just want to be able to push up and try to threaten the Night Goblin left flank over there with those Furies, and I want to see if I can get those Fanatics out early so they're not being pushed through my Plague Bearers, because I don't want to be losing too much Plague Bearers to Fanatic hits. On my right side, I pushed up incredibly aggressive because he put most of his units behind that forest. Only the Giant has sight out of it, and the Giant has a short charge range of max 12 inches. So I moved to be 12 inches away. On to my opponent's turn 1. My opponent's turn 1, he pulled back his left flank, which has the Giant and the Squigs. He pulled them behind the forest because he didn't want any charges against any of his stuff. And then opposite, he pushed forward with his Mangler Squigs and the Hoppers and the Night Goblins because he saw that I didn't push forward too aggressively there. So essentially we start spinning around each other kind of in this motion. He summons a Foot of Gork. That's the template in front of my unit, and it passes back over to my turn. My turn 2. On my left flank, I have my Furies charge the unit of 5 Hoppers. They were able to decisively kill them in close combat, and then I chose to overrun to get as far away from the Manglers and the Night Goblins as possible to not take Mangler hits and not take Fanatic hits. In the middle, I moved both of my Plague Bearers up, trying to get the Night Goblins to commit and come closer. The Great Unclean One marched forward to get as close as possible to that unit of Night Goblins, and I believe I got to 10 inches away. so I would be able to declare a charge against that unit. On my right flank, I move the Furies up in support, and the Flamers are on the far right, and they were able to look around that forest and shoot at the Squig Hoppers. Moving on to the next turn, in the left flank, I had my Furies charge into the flank of that Night Goblin unit. I'm not trying to break them or do any of that kind of stuff. I'm just trying to bait out those Fanatics and have those Fanatics go after my Furies instead of go after my Plague Bearers. I reform the big unit of Plague Bearers, and in the reform, I move Tamurkhan over to the left flank of the unit instead of being in the right flank, because he's got his Mangler Squigs on that side. So I want Tamurkhan to be able to smash into the Mangler Squigs with all of his attacks. He also moves over there to be able to do the summoning at them and chip off a couple wounds. The Battle Standard Bearer stays in the right flank to give the Locust over the biggest part of the army. Then on the right flank, the Great Unclean One was able to get a charge against that big unit of Night Goblins. He did take a Fanatic to the face and did take one wound. The Plague Bearers then started going toe-to-toe against the Giant, and the other unit of Furies charged the front of the Squig Herd that had been shot down just a little bit by the Flamers. The Flamers then moved to be able to see the Hoppers and shoot at them and wipe them out. And the Furies were able to break the Squig unit. The Squig unit then exploded and ended up taking 4 of the Furies with him. And so I only had 1 Fury left. And it wounded the Giant, it wounded the Plague Bearer unit, and it wounded the Furies, or the Flamers. Moving on to the next turn. So the left unit of Furies ended up dying to a ton of Fanatic hits. The big unit with Tamurkhan was able to get a charge off on a Mangler Squig and kill it, but then I was really out of position and ended up getting charged in the flank by a unit of Night Goblins and by the other Mangler Squig. In the center, the Great Unclean One was able to, through 3 rounds of combat, he kept pushing that unit of Night Goblins back, and then they finally got pushed off the board. So he was able to kill the BSB and the General by them. He killed the General in close combat in a challenge, and then the rest of them got ran off the table because they touched the table edge with a fallback in good order. On the right flank, the unit of 14 Plague Bearers just keeps going toe-to-toe with that Giant. My Demon saves are really helping me out in being able to tank that Giant. My poison attacks just keep chipping 1 or 2 wounds off of him every turn. And with the Manglers, or with the Squig unit popping the way that it did, it also helped me wound the Giant, but it essentially made it so my unit of Furies was out of commission. I only had 1 Fury left, and I didn't want to feed that into something to just give the 60 points away. On to the last turn of the game. So my unit with Tamurkhan is going toe-to-toe against that unit in the flank and the Mangler Squig. The Mangler Squig and Tamurkhan are just smacking each other back and forth, and Tamurkhan, for some reason, he's only rolling 2s to hit, which are truly misses because I don't get to re-roll those. And the Mangler Squig just bounces off of Tamurkhan and isn't able to actually damage him. Over in the flank, they're actually smashing into me pretty good, and I lose 5 guys. It's not enough for me to be able to rout that unit or anything. They just stick around, but I don't win combat, so I'm not able to get that unit of Night Goblins to flee. Over on my right flank, were the fight with the giant. The giant only had one wound left, and it was the last turn of the game. So I charged my flamers into the giant, and I knew it was a big risk because I could not actually get a wound on him. But because the flamers charged, they're a higher initiative, and they did get a wound on him. So it killed the giant, and he wasn't able to do more damage and try to kill that unit of plague bearers or do wounds on any of the flamers as well. And that was the end of the game. I have to thank my opponent for an awesome game. I have night goblins, and they are a ton of shenanigans and great fun to play. This opponent was awesome. He knew how to play stuff, didn't feed me his night goblins, was really trying to time his fanatic hits really well. And he did take a couple wounds off of the Great Unclean One with fanatics. And he was able to do that because he got Itchy Nuisance and dropped the Great Unclean One's toughness down to 5 and was able to get a couple wounds on him. Points ended up being the Orcs and Goblins got 122 to the Demons of Chaos 1090. On to round 2 versus High Elves. This is going to be Battle for Mountain Pass and 6 turns victory points. This is my opponent's army list. Something I noted is that he has got a dragon. So I've got to deal with a high moving dragon versus my flightless dragon, the Great Unclean One. He also has a unit of Swordmasters, which I'm going to need to be able to take care of. They are killy. So this is deployment. So deployment, I went stock standard. I've got my Furies on both flanks, my battle line with the Great Unclean One in the center, Tamurkhan also centralized, and then the Flamers right behind the unit because I don't want the Flamers being targeted by that bolt thrower. So his deployment, he put his Shadow Warriors behind me. I figured we're playing a super deep deployment zone. There's no way I'm going to be able to stop him from putting scouts behind me. I am just going to ignore them because they are worth almost no points. And it's more value for me to just deal with their 5 bow shots every turn and just move forward with my battle line and kill stuff. His other scouts are his Reavers. He put opposite my Furies. And then he put his dragon behind the forest. He didn't realize that the forest blocked line of sight. So I actually let him redeploy the dragon more centralized because he didn't realize that he wouldn't be able to have line of sight to be able to do a charge with the dragon. He thought he could just charge over the forest. So let him redeploy that. Next to the forest is the unit of Swordmasters. Next to the Swordmasters is his unit of Spears. Next to the unit of Spears is his bows that are on a hill. Next to the bows is the Bolt Thrower. And next to the Bolt Thrower, holding up his right flank, is his Frost Phoenix. So I was able to get turn 1 in the roll-off for this. And I really took advantage of that because I was able to roll for my movement spells. I got movement spells in both the flying spell from Demonology and I got Arcane Urgency on the Great Unclean One. On to turn 1. So this is the end of my opponent's turn 1. So how to explain this? So demons with Demonology have some pretty high movement shenanigans. So let's just start on the right flank where my Furies used to be. So my Furies had an epic fail. They ended up charging those Reavers. They did 1 wound and I killed 1 Reaver. The Reavers then responded in killing all of my Furies. They did an overrun and tried to be able to reach the Plague Bearers, but they were just short. So just weren't able to make it. So that's why there's that little bit of a gap in between the Reavers and my unit of 14 Plague Bearers. Then moving over to the center of the board. So the Great Unclean One, I was able to give him the enchantment that gives +1 movement in Demonology. So he went from movement 5 to movement 6. I marched him forward 12. And then I did Arcane Urgency on him, marching forward him an additional 12. So I put him an inch away in front of the Swordmaster unit. Because I was essentially like, I have a flightless dragon. I need to deny as much movement as possible for your dragon and not just give him good charges. So I put my greater demon there to make it so the dragon couldn't charge him. And the Swordmasters had to decide whether to charge him or not. In my opponent's turn, the Swordmasters did charge the Great Unclean One. He didn't declare a challenge, and I did declare a challenge, and then he refused the challenge. So his champion had to step to the back. Because he had so few attacks, he was not able to wound me at all, and I was able to just smash through 5 or 6 Swordmasters a turn, smashing into that unit with the Great Unclean One. Between his regular attacks, his stomp attacks, and hammer hand, I was able to just chew through those Swordmasters. Moving next, Tamurkhan, he got the Fly spell, which gives a unit Fly 12 in the movement phase. So you're not able to charge with Fly 12, but you're able to move Fly 12. And I just marched them 24 inches to stand in front of the Spearman unit. The same thing happened against the dragon because the dragon's base was too big to be able to fit in between the Plague Bearer unit and the Spearman. The dragon wasn't able to charge. So I was essentially giving my opponent a choice: charge with the Spearman and the dragon, because if the Spearman charge, then they're out of the way and the dragon can actually make base. But my opponent chose not to charge with the Spearman. He wanted to be able to fight in that extra rank and chose to do that. In his turn, he charged with the Swordmasters against the Great Unclean One. The dragon jumped the battle line and breathed fire at my flamers that I kept out of charge distance. He ended up putting 1 wound on them with the dragon fire because it's a magical attack, so no saves, because demons don't get saves against magical attacks. And then he shot bows and the bolt thrower into the big unit of Plague Bearers. As you can see, I've lost, I want to say 6 to shooting between the bolt thrower, magic missile from the wizard and the spear unit, and the bow shots from the archers on the hill. I moved my Furies on the left flank to be right behind the unit of Plague Bearers so they could not be charged by the dragon as well, because there was nowhere to be able to base them in the charge arc. And then they were able to charge over the Plague Bearer unit into the archers, because the archers were further back than the front of the spearmen, and they're on a hill, so the Furies are able to draw a line of sight to them. Throughout the next couple turns of combat, the Furies and the archers, it turned out to be mutual destruction. In the last round of combat that they had, the last Fury died and the last archer died. So it was mutual destruction between those two units in close combat. The unit with Tamurkhan charged the spearmen. Tamurkhan was in base with the sorcerer, and he did do a challenge, and my BSB accepted against his unit champion, and my BSB just killed the unit champion, and then Tamurkhan, because he was in base with the sorcerer, just dropped his 5 attacks into him and just killed the sorcerer. So I was able to get rid of my opponent's magic very quickly. The spear unit was able to hold against the Plague Bearer unit. I did get the demonic vessels off, I believe is the spell, and it's +1 strength, +1 attack to the unit. So this turn, my Plague Bearers had a ton of attacks on the charge. I did kill a ton of spearmen, but they did hold and they passed their break check. There was only I want to say maybe a dozen of them left after the swings. In this same charge phase, my 14 Plague Bearers charged into those Reavers that were left and killed them in close combat, and then I turned to face the center of the board, so facing the dragon and stuff. The Flamers moved to the right to get out, and they marched to get out of the charge arc of the dragon and to stay out of the charge arc of the Phoenix. In my opponent's next turn, he turned the dragon to Flame Breath the Flamers again to try to get rid of them, and failed to do any wounds. And he was facing them to be able to do a charge or charge against the unit of 14 Plague Bearers. Unfortunately for my opponent, by this time, the Great Unclean One had finished smashing through the rest of his Swordmasters and was able to turn around. Again, I was able to get the +1 movement onto him, as Tamurkhan's unit was also out of combat at this point. And he was able to charge the dragon in the flank. Before that charge in the flank, this is one of the instances where the Flamers took the Gifts of Mutation, so the minus strength and toughness, or weapon skill. I got that off on the dragon and was able to take the dragon's strength and toughness down to 5. So it was, it was down by 2. So his toughness was 4 and the dragon's strength was 5 because it was a star dragon, and star dragons are strength 7. The Great Unclean One charged in. He ended up taking 1 wound from the Prince, because the Prince has always strikes first, and had a dragon blade and got 1 wound through. And that 1 wound turned into 2 because it was a giant blade. So the Great Unclean One took 2 wounds. So at this point, the Great Unclean One had taken 3 wounds. And then the Great Unclean One smashed the Dragon Prince. And because of the D3 wounds on the flail, just smashed that dragon to pieces. Tamurkhan's unit turned around, and Tamurkhan shot the summoning at the Phoenix, who had taken a couple wounds from charging the back of the Plague Bearers. Because of poison attacks, he took a couple wounds from that, and then the summoning killed him. And that ended the game. I have to thank my opponent for the game. We talked afterwards, and in hindsight, I think he came to the same conclusion I did, that he should have charged the Spearman and the Dragon into the Tamurkhan unit instead of trying to jump the battle line, because I just ended up leading his Dragon by the nose and not allowing him to really get a good charge, and then was able to hit him with the Great Unclean One. So the match ended up being a win for the Demons. High Elves got 75 points, and the Demons of Chaos got 21-25. This takes us into round 3 versus Warriors of Chaos. This is going to be command and control, where we need to control a hill in the center of the board. My opponent's army is going to be a Dragon Lord, so I'm going to be against a second dragon, and then a unit of Forsaken, a ton of chariots, and some Dragon Ogres. Those Forsaken are going to be super scary. Warriors of Chaos are essentially the bane of my existence, because almost their entire army has magical attacks. So, into deployment. So I went with my stock standard deployment style. Furies, both sides, battle line with the Plague Ogre, or with the Plague Bearers, and the Great Unclean One in the center. I switched it up just a little bit by putting Tamurkhan and the BSB on the left side of the big unit instead of the right side where the Great Unclean One is. And I have my Flamers over by Tamurkhan because I wanted to be able to take out those hounds that are across the table from me. So, speaking of the hounds across the table from me, let's talk my opponent's deployment. He has on what would be his right flank is 2 units of hounds, followed by a chariot. Then his big unit of Forsaken, centered on that hill, which is going to be worth 200 victory points. Then next to that, he's got his Sorcerer Lord on a mount. Then next to that is his unit of Dragon Ogres. Then a chariot, his Dragon Lord, which is not centered on the board. I was confused on why he put him on that side. And then on his left flank is his 3rd chariot. This picture is my opponent's turn 2 after he had done moves. So let's start with my left flank. So my left flank, the Furies moved up and charged against those hounds. The hounds passed their leadership to be able to stay. There was one more round of combat, and I was able to wipe out the hounds. In return, the hounds killed 1 Fury. Moving over, the Flamers moved forward and doused the other unit of hounds with fire. And then Tamurkhan also shot that unit with the summoning and was able to destroy that unit. Tamurkhan and his unit moved forward to be in charge range of the chariot and just at the very max charge range of the Forsaken, as I didn't want the Forsaken to get in, but I wanted the chariot to be able to get in, because I need to be taking units one at a time and not taking a ton of damage all in one go. Moving over, I just shifted my battle line just a little bit, keeping my Great Unclean One back and the unit of 14 Plague Bearers. The unit of 5 Furies moved forward and just started trying to disrupt marches and stuff from the chariots and the dragon on that side. For some reason, my opponent used the dragon to move back and forth with the Furies, and he breathed fire on them a couple times. And then it actually took the Sorcerer Lord coming over and shooting the summoning at them to kill them. I don't know why my opponent was using the dragon to go after the Furies, as the Furies are only worth 60 points. That dragon should have come into my battle line and just munch it on me. Because of magical attacks and stuff, he would have started destroying my battle line. That being said, after the charge, Tamurkhan was able to destroy that chariot in one chop. I overran into the Forsaken. I rolled an 11-inch overrun and was able to just base the Forsaken. In my magic phase, I did the Demonic Vessels magic spell, which is the +1 strength, +1 attack. I'm pretty sure I'm getting the name of that correct. So my Plague Bearers and Tamurkhan shot up in their lethality and getting an extra attack. Absolutely smashed the Forsaken, as I had a higher initiative because of the charge. And that unit wasn't able to attack back. Forsaken have stubborn, so they were able to just fall back in good order and fall back and landed where they're at right now. That Plague Bearer unit overran and just clipped the Dragon Ogres. So just the corner of my Plague Bearers and just the corner of the Dragon Ogres are actually touching, so we're in combat there. The Great Unclean One moved up to protect the flank of that Plague Bearer unit to make sure that the chariot didn't try to turn the corner and charge the flank, and that the Dragon Ogres wouldn't be able to do it in case I failed my combat and I didn't overrun. So he was there just as a stopgap to make sure that I didn't have unprotected flank. Moving on, we've got on the left flank, after the dragon and the sorcerer dispatched those furies, the Dragon Lord lined up with the chariot to be able to charge my unit of 14 Plague Bearers. In my turn, instead of just like lining up to take the charge, my Flamers were in range to be able to put the fly spell onto that unit of 14 Plague Bearers. So using Fly 12, I just marched and flew over the top of the chariots and the dragon to make it so there was yet another turn that those chariots and the dragon were not able to get into combat. This tactic is all about making it so my opponent has to line up stuff and truly get into combat against things that actually matter. And I really hope that my opponent learned what priorities are on the tabletop with this. Afterwards, he did line up and charge the Plague Bearers with all three of them. He was just trying to make sure that that unit was dead. And he said that he had realized that when the Forsaken were just destroyed by my Plague Bearers, that essentially he wouldn't be able to get that center objective, get the hill, and try to get the win. So he was just trying to get as many points out of my army as he could. So he charged the unit of 14 Plague Bears with both chariots and the dragon. They absolutely destroyed that unit. They overran it. Because the chariots have frenzy, their mark of corn, they overran, and I had put my Great Unclean One over there in the corner to be able to charge one of the chariots after it overran, as this would be turn 6. The Great Unclean One was able to get into base with one of those chariots and destroyed it. And then that was the end of the game. So I was able to be on the hill with Tamurkhan and the unit of Plague Bearers and get those 200 extra points. And then I had killed his battle line unit of the Forsaken, and he had killed the unit of 14 Plague Bearers and the unit of Furies. Oh, I forgot to talk about the Dragon Ogres. So the Dragon Ogres, they issued a challenge and Tamurkhan accepted. Tamurkhan killed the Dragon Ogre champion, and then they broke from combat, so they were fleeing in my turn. In my turn, I had the Great Unclean One declare a charge against them, as he was close enough to be able to declare a charge. And then the unit of Red Furies also declared a charge against them. I had the Great Unclean One move first. Because the Dragon Ogres were fleeing, they had to flee again, and they moved away from the Great Unclean One. And then because the Furies were in a flank arc against them, the Dragon Ogres didn't actually move further away from the Furies. And then when the Furies charged, they were able to base them, and because the Dragon Ogres were fleeing, they were destroyed. And that was the end of the match. So again, I have to thank my opponent for the game. Absolute blast. I love being able to play against thematic stuff. So this was Daemons going up against Warriors of Chaos. Super themey. Had a ton of fun in playing. The Forsaken are a very scary unit, and I'm glad I was able to get the jump on them. Me and my opponent, we actually talked afterwards, and I was wondering why he used his dragon the way that he did. And he said he didn't want to throw his dragon into the Plague Bearer unit because he would just be bogged down the whole game, which is true. But you could challenge out things and just keep doing challenges and cycle through my unit champion and then the BSB or Tamurkhan and get those kills and get the victory points for that stuff. And you just got to grind it out. And I think that was the one mistake for my opponent in this match. So that being said, the game ended up being a win for the Daemons of 952 to the Warriors of Chaos 248. This ended up being a 3-win victory for me in the tournament, and it ended up getting me being able to be first place. These are the statistics from BCP. Again, I want to thank the organizers in the TO, the game store, the community, the guys coming out and playing the game. I absolutely love playing games of Old World. Let's get on to how I thought my army performed. So first up, Tamurkhan. How did he perform? Him being a level 4 wizard was clutch. Him having things like the summoning and demonic familiars and demonic vessel was clutch. Him getting plus attack and plus strength to his unit and absolutely destroying things. He is not end-all be-all. Absolutely, he is killable by something big and nasty charging into this unit and either having support in not being able to be challenged out. So if like a dragon with knights charge in, you can make it so the Demon Prince can be targeted. He's not end-all be-all, but he was absolutely clutch in this tournament, being able to get the movement and spells. Moving on to the Great Unclean One. He is a monster. Toughness 7 with demon saves, regen, that stuff. You need to make sure that you're not targeted by magic, obviously, as magic will take away both the demon save and the regen save for being demonic. But him having the Plague Flail and also being a level 4 using battle magic, having Arcane Urgency, and having Hammer Hand, just putting more and more damage into whatever he's fighting. He is a beast. Again, if a dragon gets the jump on him, I think he would get destroyed. So you've got to make sure to take the movement away from your opponent. The BSB, he is nothing really to write home about this guy. He is a linchpin that just makes sure that units don't disappear on rolling boxcars for a break check, and is a couple extra wounds in close combat of his 3 attacks just smashing into stuff. The Furies, these guys, I assumed I was going to lose every single game, that they were going to run out, try to charge stuff, maybe kill some things, and then maybe get in the way of a couple charges. That's exactly what they did in my games. I lost one of them every single game. The other unit, I either had one left or the unit was still almost full strength. These guys are huge performers. I think Demons should run a unit or 2 of Furies in every army list. They are so good. Do they need to be upgraded to be marks? I don't think so. But if you have the points to be able to give them something, you totally can. The Plague Bearers. I think the Plague Bearers are not the best demon entry in the list, but I think they are the best infantry. So flamers, or not flamers, but horrors, bloodletters, demonettes, and plague bearers. I think plague bearers are the best out of the 4 by far. I don't think it's even close. Then moving on to the flamers. Flamers, I think, are a undervalued unit in the demon list, because you're able to take something like Power Vortex in a rare choice. Flamers, totally worth it for the -1 to cast. You do need to upgrade to a level 3 to make it so that bubble turns into a 24-inch bubble, but I think it's totally worth it. If they're targeted, if you let your opponent draw a bead on them with something like Fireball or the summoning like a magic missile of some kind, this unit will disappear. So you need to make sure to take care of them, put them behind your battle line, make sure that they are babysat, and just push your battle line towards the magic users and keep the flamers behind that battle line. I think the army performed very well overall. Any weak points in it, I think, would be it relies heavily on magic. So if your opponent has anti-magic, it can really shut this army down. So moving on to you guys. What's the stuff you guys want to see? I am working on some videos, and they will be coming out here in the near future. I'm actually going to try to get more stuff up this week, so look forward to that. And like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out. And remember, 'cause bad guys.